Hi, and welcome back to the Britt Mayer Show, where we talk about culture, politics, faith, and health, and the stories that matter most to you. Today, we have an incredible conversation with S.D. Smith. He is the brilliant author behind the Green Ember series. For those of you who don't know, it is a favorite among Christian families and homeschoolers. My kids love this series, and we're so excited that I finally had S.D. Smith on, with 68% of parents reporting that they are concerned about the negative cultural influences on their children. S.D. Smith's stories of courage, virtue, and hope offer such a powerful antidote. And we are going to get into the meat of why storytelling is a weapon. We're going to explore how his tales combat darkness and nurture faith and get into children's DNA. And you're going to love his take on all of this. Make sure you listen through the end, because we do talk about some of the spicy headlines and how it connects back to the power of good stories. You're not going to want to miss this. It's such an incredible conversation, and I learned so much in it. So I'm excited for you to come along for the ride of this conversation and this episode. Please subscribe wherever you are watching or listening. It really helps us continue in our mission. And then the show notes are loaded with so much information for you. For those of you who want to pick up this book, give it as a gift. I highly recommend it. And also, this episode is a great one to listen along to with your kids. I think they're going to love it. So with no further ado, here's my conversation with S.D. Smith. I love We Heart Nutrition. I have been using their products now for over a year, and I can tell you that anecdotally, I can tell a difference since using these. I'm one of those mamas who has tried so many different supplements. I have the supplement graveyard that many of you probably have. And since using We Heart Nutrition, this is actually a product line that I have felt the difference in, and I won't give up because I love everything I have tried. They don't compromise on quality. So you are getting top shelf products when you purchase We Heart Nutrition. And here is something so exciting that I am thrilled to share with you. They just crossed a massive milestone. We Heart Nutrition has donated $500,000 and counting to pregnancy pro-life resource centers. Not only am I getting a product, and my husband is getting products that he loves, but we are investing in something that's actually saving babies and helping mamas who need a little extra support. So I would encourage you to go try weheartnutrition.com. They have incredible packages. I love their magnesium. I love their omega-3s. I use their Wholesome Women's multivitamin. My husband uses their Wholesome Men's vitamin. It's all so good. And you can get this with an exclusive discount using code ROOTEDWINGS at weheartnutrition.com. Sam Smith, thank you so much for joining and sitting down to talk about stories as a weapon for good and for evil, and especially focusing on children's fiction. But adults, the parents typically get swept up in the story too. So we are going to talk all the things about good and evil, about what is noble and right and what is evil, and how you use writing as a weapon. So welcome to the show.
I am so delighted to be here. Thank you so much for having me.
This is going to be great. So why don't we just kick it off. Tell us how you got started. Not a whole lot of people can say that they are a writer full time, but you are. And we're going to talk about some of the books that my kids can't put down. And I've just been looking forward to having this chat with you. So how did you get started, and how did you get to where you are?
I've loved stories since I was a little kid. I was unusual, I think, for a lot of authors. I was not an early reader. It took me kind of a long time. I was a teenager. So I always in sort of when I was growing up, I'm 48, the sort of culture around where I was, there were a lot of girls that read, but not a lot of boys. And so I'm always excited when boys will pick up my books, and they'll sort of a lot of boys have become sort of first time. It'll be their first book, and the reluctant readers will sort of get started with my books. That always makes me happy because of sort of my slow approach to storytelling, or my slow approach to reading, or but once I started, I couldn't stop. I was all in. But these stories in particular, I was always a little bit of a creative kid. I would write poetry, and I started writing songs when I was a teenager. We were missionary kids. I'm from West Virginia, but we moved to South Africa when I was 12 years old.
I didn't know that. Okay.
Yeah, I'm a missionary kid. I turned 13. My first birthday in South Africa was the day Nelson Mandela was released from prison. And
oh my gosh.
And so when I left, he was the president. So it was a really interesting time to be there. He went from prison to president while we were there, and apartheid fell, and it was just a fascinating time to live there. And we're very much like West Virginia people. That's a big theme in my books, and I love where I'm from. It's kind of unusual, that we don't live in sort of a media center or anything. Even on the East Coast, we don't live in Nashville or anything like that. But we're sort of out of it a little bit, away from the. But I think that's been good in a way, and it sort of dovetails with why I think how my own story got started with my kids, because the Green Ember it started out as a story that I told my toddling daughter when we were sitting on my lap. I used to tell her stories all the time. And one day we were sitting on our porch, Appalachian woods, rural, you can imagine, West Virginia. And there were rabbits hopping around in the yard. So I just started telling her a story about an older sister rabbit, and she had a little brother. And so I told her a story about these two rabbits, and she loved it. And there were several different little serial stories I would tell her at times, bedtimes and on walks, that kind of thing. But this one, she really loved it for some reason. And I just kept sort of telling her what happened next and what happened next. And soon her little brother joined. And so it was very natural that the main characters in the story were an older sister and a younger brother. And they both, I think it's fascinating because, when they're really little, the stories are a little bit more didactic, a little bit more, there's a little bit more of like moral tales, that kind of thing. But as it grew, it became just a more full-blown adventure, no secret agenda or anything. It was just I was just telling them a good story. And at one point, sort of the climax of that time together, which was over many years, they said what became the climax of the first Green Ember book, that happened, 100 yards from where I'm sitting right now. And out in about by the step tree. We call this little tree the step tree because the roots look like steps. And we were outside there, and they paused, and I paused after this part of the story, and they said, "Oh, Daddy, you gotta write this down. Like this is really special." And so I thought, well, that was fun. It was all like improvised in the moment. But I sort of said in my heart, okay, I'm going to write that down. And so I wrote the story really totally just as a gift to my kids. I'm going to think about them. If I thought if the kids love it, and it's sort of this relic of our time together that we spent so much time going over these stories, if it's just in our family, then that is winning. Like that is okay. That's good. And so that was my goal, and maybe it would pass down, and people would say, "Oh, crazy old Grandpa Sam, maybe this is a story he used to tell the kids," and it would just kind of be our little family thing. Well, my brother-in-law and I had been thinking of starting a little publishing company. We'd been doing some work on something called Story Warren, which is Allies in Imagination. We're trying to serve parents, and we decided. He was like really big. He said, I really love this. Let's do it. And I was like, I don't want to do that. I don't want to publish my book. But he insisted, and so we shared the book, and just to our astonishment, it just really, really took off, and I just couldn't believe it. I think it was just there were a lot of other families like ours that were hungry for these. I call them new stories with an old soul. Like
totally.
Modern pacing, sort of modern storytelling in many ways, but that sort of that old school virtue and old moral imagination, and I think that. So I think that's why I don't know really. I think the big answer is I don't really know why it's exactly caught on, but I think it has reached parents and kids at the same time. And it's what families are sort of hungry for, this kind of a thing. I don't think it's particularly like the greatest writing ever or anything like that. I just think it's meeting a real deep hunger people have for old school virtue, for moral imagination, for heroic courage. I think people are just longing for that. And I think there's been a bit of a gap in the market there. And I think we filled it.
When you were telling the story to your kids as it was being created as you went, were you intentionally thinking, I want to teach my children the virtue of courage. I want to teach my children that good wins in the end, that there will be great battles, but that good always conquers evil. Were you thinking that, or were you just telling a story that came from somewhere and you were just along for the ride?
It definitely was not that. I did not have that in mind. And I sort of would take more of the Tolkien's approach along those lines. He talked about sort of where do stories come from, and he talked about them bubbling up from the leaf mold of the mind. He talked about forest, where something will grow in the forest, and everything that fell, the leaves, whatever happened, that sort of contribute to what's going on in the soil of what grows out. So I think what grows out of an honest storyteller's work is from what's in their heart. And I think my heart was and is really fixed on the kingdom of God. And I that's my passion. I am a devout Christian. And I think the stories are not allegories. They're not. There's not a one-to-one comparison. There's not. It is a free story where a kid does not have to be thinking the whole time. What am I being taught? It is. And I sort of Tolkien had his approach to allegory was that he said I politely distrust. I can't remember his exact words, but he basically he was concerned that allegory often lays in the sort of the purposeful domination of the author toward the reader, and I think what he would describe would be more of my take would be, I think there's a lot of applicability for my story, but not allegory. As in, if you read my stories, they are going to ring your bells big time about Christianity, the coming kingdom of God, goodness, virtue, morality. It's going to just resound within you. But there aren't one-to-one comparisons. It's not a lesson. It's not a sneaky sort of hidden lesson. It's you can just enjoy it. You can have fun. You can love it. But
well, my kids sure have enjoyed it. And I want for those in the audience that are just jumping in thinking, okay, what are you talking about? Green Ember, what series? I have your most recent release that you sent us. And I told you in the green room, my kids were so excited because you autographed it. I can't promise that everyone listening is going to get an autographed copy, but we sure did. And my kids were like, what? We got SD Smith's signature. How did you pull this off, Mom? I should have kept it until Christmas. But my daughter has already cracked this open because she has read your entire Green Ember series, I think twice now. But I know that there are people listening who are thinking, wait, what is Green Ember? So can you set the scene for us? What is Green Ember, and what, just give us a glimpse into the storyline.
Sure. It is about an older brother, or older sister and a younger brother. And they're sort of, she's on the edge of like coming of age. They're so many children's stories involve children and some kind of a disconnection from parents. So they go out on an adventure. You have that in Narnia. You basically have it in the Lord of the Rings as well, with the hobbits sort of standing in for children. And that happens in this story. These two, sister and brother, Heather and Pickett, they become disconnected when wolves attack their sort of idyllic, off the grid home that's kind of away from the troubles, but the troubles find them. And they get sort of spilled into this cauldron of misadventure and chases, and they're out on the road, and they finally find a community that is dedicated to what they call the mended wood. They keep saying things like this: "It will not be so in the mended wood." They long for this coming healing that's going to happen. Where the truth, this great king, King Jupiter was killed, and so everyone's sort of looking for his heir. It does sound very on the nose, but when you sort of summarize it, but it's really not. It's got a lot of classic novels, themes and that kind of a thing. But it's basically these two kids, and they kind of find out that their own family history was involved in what led to the rebellion, or what led to the downfall of this sort of golden age, this big fall. And so they have this sort of personal investment in setting things right, as well as sort of this big vision for what can happen when the mending comes. And it's really cool. I mean, they're kids, but they find a lot of adults that are allies. I think there's a lot of things that sort of go against normal, I mean, I don't know, modern sort of tropes of parents are always wrong, or adults are always dumb, and kids are always right, and the kids always prove the parents wrong at the end, and the parents are like, oh my goodness, you were right, I'm a stupid dad and you're great. It's not that. I mean, I hope it's authentic. I hope it feels real, because sometimes there are adults that are bad, that betray, that do the wrong thing, and there's a lot of moral complexity inside the rabbits. But they're evil. The evil are sort of the birds of prey. They call the lords of prey, and wolves are sort of uncomplicatedly evil characters. So there's a lot of moral clarity there. But within each of the rabbits, they have this. And Pickett, sort of the main boy character, male character, he has these role models of like, I can follow this person who's in my family who's betrayed the cause, or I could follow this person who's persecuted but virtuous and is waiting and fighting for the right and taking his lumps but being bold. And so they have this sort of, there's this moral complexity in there. But I think within that there's really, all of my books I think come down to sort of, there's a way of life and there's a way of death. And if you follow the way of death, this is sort of, and you might succeed for a while. I mean, that happens all the time in the Bible, happens all the times in life for a while. But there is this sort of sense of this of justice and of truth and of virtue that this sort of way of life opens up for these characters, and they go through very difficult times embracing that way of life.
So why do you think that stories like this are so important for the big story that we find ourselves in today, especially in the realm of children's fiction.
Man, I think that the power of stories, and this is why I think it's so important for Christians to be good storytellers, like it is, I think, for plumbers to be excellent plumbers. You don't necessarily have to draw crosses on the pipes, but you have to do a good job as a plumber. When you're making a meal, you don't have to write a verse on the pancakes. You can just serve the pancakes really, really well.
I would fail if I was supposed to be doing that. I've been failing for 12 years.
But I have a big picture view that God made the world, and because of that, the doctrine of creation is true, and it has these implications that all this good stuff is God's. So that's plumbing, that's parenting, that's pastoring, that's storytelling, and it's preparing food. And you don't make it okay by sort of co-opting those vocations to sort of like be utilitarian, to reduce them to just mere utilities to convey information. And I think that that's true about storytelling and painting and music. You don't have to, it's not so much, that all this stuff belongs to God. And so all that Satan does is he bends things. He perverts things. He twists what already exists. Satan bends what God intends. And so I want to embrace my role as a storyteller. And I think it's so powerful because C.S. Lewis said that the intellect is the organ of truth, but that the imagination is the organ of meaning. And I think what we think is, oh, well, sure, there's these areas of imagination, but I'll just pack in as much truth as possible, and that'll make it okay. Because really, we should be doing things that are fun, or eating pancakes, or like we really need to just like share the gospel and tell the truth. And I'm like, tell the truth all the time. Tell truthful stories, of course. Yes, always be truthful. But there's more. There is meaning, and I think imagination being this organ of meaning. I think that stories. Why is the Bible just absolutely teeming with stories? And many of them are like not what you would think. They go, they're very broad. They're very comprehensive. I think storytelling is the way that we come to love things. I like to use the example of like, you can say God is powerful. That's a true statement, but we don't know what that means until we have a story. So when when Jesus raises Lazarus from the dead, or raises Jairus' daughter, or parts the Red Sea, you have the experience of what it means for God to be powerful, or God to be loving. And you don't necessarily, you have the truth. And I think the best stories, both in fiction and in history, don't subtract truth. They add meaning. So I think that one of my friends, Heidi Johnson, she said that these most faithful stories are not an escape from reality. They're an escape into reality.
I think that's good.
It is. It's magnificent. And that's sort of like a creed for me, is that I want to tell faithful stories. That doesn't mean that I need to dominate my readers by using the storytelling mechanism as a sort of a harsh, blunt instrument to sort of get information into their heads. So I think of it as more of a generous, like, we are made for stories. And when we tell the truth, and when we tell, good stories, faithful stories that harmonize with reality with a capital R, which I think is what the Lord of the Rings does so beautifully. You don't necessarily have to say, well, Jesus rose from the dead like Gandalf did, or, you don't have to find those. It's just, you get it. You get it so deeply.
I like that. I like what you just said, because I think sometimes the temptation can be to almost hyperanalyze, even
Absolutely.
like in the co-ops that we are a part of. My son is reading Charlie and the Chocolate Factory right now, and I got to a point where I was like, I don't need him to do a project for every chapter. I just want him to get lost in the story. Like, it's so beautiful if you can just read it and laugh and gasp and be shocked. But if you're hyper analyzing every corner and every period and then you lose the whole story. And that is, like what you just said, that is the beauty of just getting lost in a story that is good. You feel it. It's something spiritual that it pulls you in, and it does something on the spiritual level. And that is the power of a good story.
I agree so much. And I mean, I think of it as like sort of, what do you do autopsies on? You do autopsies on dead things. not on living things. And I think sometimes our approach to literature or to art in general as Christians even has been to sort of like analyze it so dramatic. And I think it's good because we've been burned before on intellectual and philosophical, theological stuff. So we're scared and we're like, oh my goodness, they're going to, and we should be in a sense, because the whole thing is the stories are powerful. They are been described as like catechisms for our bones. They get inside of us. You know, if you read whatever I don't know what's a hip hop, new book that's out right now, if you read that every day for, say that it's a book that's just sort of like at variance with sort of the reality of the way that God has made the world, and you read that every day for years and years and years, that will catechize your soul. I mean, it goes deep. And I think that's why even just storytelling is so profoundly powerful. I mean, I think, that's a sort of a general critique of a lot of Christians have been like, we've almost been in our storytelling, like trying to, I heard it described as like, we're trying to sell vegetables while the other side is sort of giving away candy. And I think that we're like, it's just a weird, like we're not approaching it with, I think we're thinking power, truth, we'll law. These are the kind of things. And I just think I think that you lose elections 100 years after you lose the story, because the story is what shapes what you love. It shapes your imagination. So if you see certain kinds of depictions of families or this kind of a thing, like if you fall in love with stories like that, that's going to shape you far more than technical information, even if it's accurate. People come in, through lots of ways, poetry, sunsets. Most often people come to faith through experiences of love. It's not just convincing their mind, but we're these whole beings made in the image of God, and we're more than just brains on a stick. And I think storytelling unlocks sort of that deeper part of us. It's the meaning. It unlocks meaning for us, and that makes it dangerous. It does make it dangerous, because that means we got to pay attention. Because if you've got somebody sort of on the other team, like the other cosmic team, I don't mean like politically or whatever. I mean like you could that is dangerous in a way that. Just telling like a false, even just like a false statement.
Well, because a story is a weapon, as you just so well put it. It's a weapon that can be wielded for good or for evil. I was looking up some statistics just recently on early America, and I don't know if you know this, but at the time of the settlers coming into America, most families, when they finally got around to getting a bookshelf up or having a shelf up, they had two books. It was the Bible and Pilgrim's Progress, and that was standard. Those were the books. But it's interesting that it was the Bible and a story that is, I would say, is very heavy on allegory and was right. We just studied John Bunyan. Man, the stuff that guy went through too. Have you ever studied John Bunyan? Whoa.
Oh yeah.
I mean, during like the Reformation time, and I didn't realize there was so much, this is another topic, but so much back and forth with the Church of England and the nonconformists, and like there was so much power struggle with Parliament and the Civil War, and he lived through all of that, majority in a jail cell, prison cell, and then he was writing this incredible allegory, which would become the one book that almost every early American family had outside of the Bible. Now, this is what I want to get into with you, is that book is so on the nose about the battle of good and evil.
Yeah.
We live in a time now where I think the lines have become so blurred between good and evil, even in the stories that are written for children. And that's not even talking about the stuff that is so on the face diabolical, like a boy can become a girl, but even the stuff that's just kind of soft, like the agendas that are hidden. It's really hard now as a parent to know what your kid should read or shouldn't read. And I'd like your take on what the heck is going on in our current culture of book writing for children. Is this intentional, or is this just a byproduct of a society that is decaying from within?
Yeah, I agree with you. It's funny. I love history too. And I was reading about Daniel Boone, and he when people sometimes think he was illiterate, and that Daniel Boone was here, killed Barr.
He carved it on a tree. Yeah.
But he was not at all. He read Pilgrim's Progress all the time. Pilgrim's Progress in the Bible as well, and that's so true. And I think that is a great book, especially for a biblically literate culture, and that's a fantastic tool. I do think I think that the battle for the hearts and imaginations of kids, I think I think it's a cosmic battlefield because they are not set yet. I think the kids, particularly the ages that I write for, which would be sort of like the 7, 8, 9 to 12, 13, that would be the sweet spot. A lot of older kids and younger kids enjoy them, and adults. But I think there's something about that age that they are not totally jaded yet. They are open in a way. So I think middle grade fiction has been so powerful for formationally for people. And I'm pretty frustrated by, like you described, as sort of, I do think that our imaginations are not neutral. So I think, like the intellect, they are capacities. I mean, I think they're tools, but they're capacities. We've been created with the capacity to think. That is an intellect. We all have it. You might have a kid that's more intellectual, or a person that's more intellectual, and you might have a person that's more imaginative. But every child has an imagination. They're all gifted by God in this way, and some have greater. And it's a muscle. I mean, you can exercise it more, and you can grow your imagination. And I always encourage people to grow their imagination, to give their imagination away, use their imagination as not as a self-indulgent, as in I'm an artist, so then I will have self-expression. I think about it as a Christian vocation that's involved in love and service. So you're trying to give. That's certainly my vocation. I'm thinking about loving others and giving them a gift. But this time in the life is so crucial, and I'm actually frustrated because I do think the imagination will serve any master. It will serve God, Satan, self. I do think if it's not doxological, it will be diabolical. I think that it's important for us to have an imagination that's under the lordship of Christ, and that is
right. Because you would say there is no neutral then in that.
No, I don't. No, I certainly don't think so. I think that's space that is claimed by God. Now that doesn't, the result of that to me is not a cage. For the lordship of Christ is not a cage. It's a key. It unlocks freedom and liberty. And I think it gives us a more robust and open view towards art and towards creativity. I think that is all God's stuff. And I think it frustrates me that perversity sort of, that the world has said, I'm going to take this crucial stage and I'm going to wrestle it free, and I'm going to pervert these stories and use them for sort of adult propaganda arguments, and I'm going to insert all this garbage into it. And a thing that frustrates me a little bit is that the reaction often from Christians has been, oh, you're going to insert this political agenda into books to try to harm our kids. Well, we're going to do that just as hard on the other side, and we're going to make things. And in the end, the kids are like, I don't really like this. Like, I don't. That's not. And I think
it
kids
feels forced.
It does. It's dominant, it's heavy-handed. And I think what kids want is life. They want an invitation to the way of life. They want role models. They want to see something good that they can emulate. They want to see someone. They want to hear. They want to see the middle part. They want to see the middle part of the story where they fail and it's tough and they persevere through that, and they go through pain, they go through difficulty, but they press on. And I think there are lots of different kinds of Christian stories. I mean, you do have stories where there's martyr stories. Those are, the guy didn't win, or the woman didn't win in those stories, but they won. And it's so you can tell a lot, but you can also tell a very thoroughly Christian story, which is the happier than you ever thought possible ending, which I particularly love. But because better at the end than you even thought. The thing that you're trying to restore, I think that's the story we're in, is it's not just restoration of Eden, but better. Not just Adam doing a good job.
Come on.
Actually,
totally agree.
God, the God King ruling on earth. I mean, that's better than the original story that was broken. So I love those kinds of stories. And yeah, I just think it's a massive battleground. And I am less interested in saying, like, I'm going to counter your methodology of messing up these stories by giving your propaganda. And I'm not as excited about, like, well, I'm going to give you my propaganda. I think, no, it all belongs to God. I'm going to tell a really, really great story and sort of be faithful, don't tell lies, and then see what God does with that.
Okay, if you are anything like me, you love yourself a really good candle, but you don't love polluting your home. You certainly don't love the toxins that most candles throw out, and you don't love having a headache even though your house smells really good. So enter Resistance Candles. I use Resistance Candles exclusively in my home, in my studio. My producer loves them. I have given these as gifts. Everyone I give them to loves them. We host a church small group, and Everyone who comes into my house says, your house smells so good. What is it? Well, it's resistance candles, and you're not going to get a headache. You are going to leave my home feeling great and not wanting an Advil. Not only are they proudly made in America, but they are also inspired by true stories of early American faith and grit. They're ideal for gift giving. You are going to want every single one of their candles because they smell so good. I have burned a couple of these all the way down and can't stop raving about them. Go grab the new Liberty Harvest collection. It's a 6-pack, so you get to experience some of their top scents at resistancecandles.com. Use code ROOTEDWINGS. I love that. I want to ask you about virtue in your stories, because virtue, that even that word, I don't know, do people even use the word virtue anymore? I don't hear that very much. We're such a narcissistic society, and in that virtue is not by itself. It's not narcissistic, right? Virtue in all fronts is selflessness. And we are so self-obsessed that we not only have lost the word virtue, but I think even how virtue plays out. But one of the things that when I've talked to my kids as they've been going through your Green Ember series is they are, without even knowing, they're telling me about virtue in these characters. So why don't we just talk about that, about hope, about sacrifice, about family, about biblical principles that, like you said, God created, and it is here that you have brought into these stories without feeling preachy.
I love that. There's a quote from Simone Weil, and I never get it quite right, but it's basically like that imaginary evil is attractive and exciting and interesting, and imaginary good is boring and same and everything, but real evil is awful and boring and ugly and depressing, and that real good is life-giving and beautiful. And I can't remember exactly the words that Weil said, but the idea, I think that's so true. And I think some of the task of the faithful author is to show the beauty of goodness and the excellence of virtue, and shine a light, which this is a part that a lot of Christians have a problem with, because they don't want to. They want everything to be like, they were doing bad, then they read the Bible, now they're doing good, and very simplistic, moralistic tales that are sort of transactional and have a clarity that doesn't actually exist in the real world, where, no, you might still read your Bible and lose the championship, and you might die and might get cancer. Like, these are what real people go through, these difficult times, and how do you endure under that? Then you might be martyred. I mean, there's a lot of, it doesn't always work. But how do you tell the truth, and how do you show evil for what it is, that it's not romantic, that it's gross and it's distorted and it's perverted and it doesn't lead to thriving, and that God's design, that his goodness, that his instruction is generous, it's loving, hospitable, it's life-giving. And so I think it's important to, even through sort of the ups and downs of moral complexity and the sometimes long wait for justice to happen, in stories where the evil seem to triumph. It's all through the Psalms that's what is going on? I've been doing this and I'm watching them and they're thriving. How is that possible, Lord? And so these laments all through Scripture of people saying, what is going on here? How long? And I think to deal with that complexity, but to be honest, to tell the truth, and to show virtue for what it is, and to make it not as simplistic as just like a little math calculation, where so much of modern storytelling, we want it to be safe. And I understand that, and I understand what it means. That you don't want a bunch of gross stuff or a bunch of stuff that's not age appropriate. If you just mean that, I get it, and I'm with you. But our kids are not going to be prepared for their death scenes, which are going to happen, definitely, unless there's a resurrection before that. But they're probably, almost certainly, all of us are going to, and they're probably going to go through terrible things. They're going to lose people they love. And what kind of fiction prepares them for that? Are they going to have vicarious experiences of going through the valley of the shadow of death, like Aragorn and like Sam and Frodo? Are they going to have those kinds of experiences that arm them and equip them in a way where they can tell and they can see they can see virtue? And it's another thing to be able to explain it, like, you should do good, you should not steal.
To make it a clinical definition.
It's different. Why? We have the 10 Commandments, and we have the law delivered. What else do we have? A massive narrative. And when God talks about his people, he usually says, I am the God that brought you out of Israel. God that brought you out of Egypt. And that's a whole story. It's a whole story. So therefore, because of this big narrative you're caught up in, here's the commands. And it's the same in Scripture. What do we have with Christ? We have not just one, we have 4 unique narratives of his life. They're stories. So all the commands, I think even in the world, the arguments like, oh, God, or Jesus' commands, they seem kind of backward, or they seem kind of bad, or I don't know if I can deal with that. And we miss the story. The story makes sense of the command, and we are the people of the resurrection. If the cross and the resurrection are true, then all these commands and invitations they make perfect sense. I mean, they're maybe hard, they're hard to obey, but they make sense in the context of the story. And I think that we need to give our kids a robust, vicarious memory of stories that arm them so that when they inevitably do face evil, sickness, death, persecution, trouble, all kinds of challenges, do they have the kind of armor where they can say, oh, I remember what Aragorn was like. And even more faithfully, I remember what the prophet Samuel was like. That if they have that kind of armor, I think it just equips them in a way that nothing else can, that mere information can't do that. Only a story can get in your heart that way and shape you to not just think that's right, but to love that.
It's so good. It becomes a part of you. It can either serve as a very good guide or a very bad guide.
Yes.
A good story, like a story that is written well, can serve as one or the other, because then when you're put in a position, it's almost from your subconscious, like riding a bike. We all learned it as a kid. I haven't ridden a bike in so long, but if I were to jump on it right now, I could get from point A to Z. It's in there. It's in my DNA. It's a part of me. And I think that is the beauty of stories like yours that are written to restrain evil and to bring goodness into the minds of children, even just through, you have so many of these books. It's not like you said, it's not forced. You didn't write it choppy just to teach and preach. It's written so that children can fall in love with it, so that at some point, like me riding a bike, when it's needed most, it's part of you, and you pull it and you remember how those little rabbits handled adversity and handled long suffering and handled discouragement. And because of the way you've written their virtue, they'll remember how they respond. And I think that's such a beautiful gift.
It's so true. And I don't, and again, I can't take credit. Like, I had this brilliant idea. I will shape these stories that will bless kids when they're going through tough times. I was trying to be hospitable, loving, generous. I was trying to be a good dad and share good stories with my kids. And the fact that the Lord has taken that little sort of like widow's mite and multiplied it, this little hillbilly outfit out of West Virginia, and that he's used that to shape and to encourage and inspire. And it's, I can simultaneously not take credit for that very easily, because I just am not clever enough to do that. And then also just recognize what God has done. And it's not theoretical to me, because I talked yesterday to a boy with leukemia, and these stories are informing and shaping the way he thinks about his journey through this. And I've talked to hundreds of kids like that, and families who've lost a parent, kids that are going through suffering, have resonated with these books so much. And I've heard of just thousands of signing lines with families. I'll have a mom come up crying, and maybe they've lost a son, she's lost her husband, their families rallied around these books in the cancer center, in the ICU. And I don't say that to say like, oh, what a great guy, you're so good. It's so beyond my capacity to plan or to think, but I'm so grateful that the Lord has done that. And so it's exactly what you're talking about. They have this experience that is helping, and it's not the answer. It's not the Bible. It's not a replacement for church or anything. I think the big Christian formation comes from the things that you think of: the church, theological reading of the Bible, all that, worship. But this is an aid, and it goes with the grain with those things. I think it harmonizes with reality in a way that the thing I'm most thankful for is that it serves kids. And that's my whole heart. I love that I have a job where I get to wake up in the morning and think, how do I love children, like vulnerable children? Like, how do I give them like cold water in Jesus' name? How do I bless them? And it's, and I can do it by pretending, by making up stories. And
you're reclaiming children's literature, because I think for a long time, Christians have been very apathetic with culture, with the reflections of culture, with entertainment, with the arts. And even Lord have mercy, with education. And now we're like, wait, what happened? Like, what is this? And I'm so thankful for people like you who are not just looking at it and thinking, well, it's a lost cause, it's all going to burn. But you're saying, no, we get to go in and reclaim because it was always the Lord's. There's that beautiful quote, and I can't remember who it was that said it, but every square inch of this earth, over every single square inch, Christ declares mine. It's his. And we get to walk in that authority and reclaim it in a beautiful way, not out of preachiness, especially if that's not our gifting, but through the gifts that we have, like you said, through plumbing, through changing diapers, through teaching our kids at the table, through walks with our kids and pointing out the birds, and just it's simple things. And what I have taken out of this conversation with you too is it doesn't have to be rushed. You don't have to rush to make one book the thing. Like, this has to preach the whole counsel of God and they've got to get the whole thing. No, you have a whole series here that children can get lost in, and from that they are going to pull values and stories of wonder and adventure and good triumphing over evil that has been long suffered for a long time. And they're going to remember that it takes time, that it's not an overnight victory.
I think you're so right. And I think that we culturally, I think, want to take a lot of shortcuts. Like, how do I get to the end? And I think you cannot start a tree from this giant oak. It's an acorn. It's and it's slow, and that's how everything grows, how human beings grow. And you cannot just you can't take, and honestly, when we try to take the shortcut, a lot of times I think we suffer for it. I think taking the long cut is good for us. We're built this way. We're built to take days of rest because we're not supposed to be maximally efficient. I think we're supposed to be maximally faithful. And I think you're exactly right. And if I could be an ally, and even just, there's so much of what you just said that I think about, like moms at home, like what you're doing is so profoundly revolutionary and beautiful. It is magic. And I know some people have struggled with, well, I'm not doing a big thing. I'm not a big celebrity, or I don't have the power I'm not a politician or a big filmmaker or some kind of a cultural icon. You are shaping generations from paying attention to a child and loving that child. There's nobody that can do that like you. And it's so profoundly beautiful and necessary. But like you said, it's not famous. It's not going to be necessarily celebrated. But I don't know if you've read The Great Divorce by C.S. Lewis.
Oh, it's one of my favorite books.
Oh, the woman in the end that she was a nobody in life, but they're doing this big parade for her, and it's just, that's how I think about, like, the simple mom is just, you don't know, but it's a different economy, but you are a celebrity. It's just in a different world. You're a person who is celebrated by the most ultimately good, true, and beautiful sort of economy.
It's so encouraging. Isn't that too? That's the whole gospel. Is it's such an upside down kingdom. And I think that's why stories can be used so much for the good or for the evil, because so much of the childhood fiction that we have right now inverts, like you said something a few minutes ago about how almost like how darkness can look appealing, like in modern literature. Like there's this making it look pretty and making it look appetizing, where it's like, no, like darkness is not good. It is evil. It is wicked. I was just reading the Proverbs to my kids yesterday, and there's, in the very beginning, it's like it sets its own trap for your death. Darkness, like that is what when you consume that, you are, like you said, catechizing yourself to long for and hunger for the inversion of what God made and how he ordered this universe to work in a way where you will flourish and thrive and have good success. And that's the whole economy, like you're saying, the economy of motherhood it's the upside down kingdom in action. And it takes a long time. It takes a lot. There's lots of changing diapers. There's lots of making dinners. There's lots of getting your kids to stop arguing and yelling, right? But that's the beauty of it, is in that toil, you are sowing seeds that not a whole lot can you say that you worked your life for something that gives life to eternity. Like you are catechizing souls into eternity. And I'm so glad you said that.
It's discipleship. I mean, I was reading someone recently talking about, like, how can we expand sort of discipleship or reaching people? And it's like, how do you equip, like, the people who are doing it like in very focused in an intentional way, which is parents and often moms. And it's so beautiful. I love it. I love what you're saying. There's so much power and so much value in that, and how, and the hospitality. I just think everything I think the world is intensely hostile towards children, towards little children. I mean, we literally advocate for and carry out dismembering of very, very small girls, like, and that's like a big deal. And it's something that a lot of us embrace, and a lot of our culture embraces. And from that to overlooking abuses of various kinds, and and then polluting minds and lying. And it is so hostile. And it's so, I do think there's a big cosmic sort of a story in that. It is pretty demonic. And I think that there is an invitation to all of us who are imperfect and who don't have it all together, to turn away and to say yes to our Creator, and to show the goodness of truth and the beauty of truth.
Yes. And to hold our kids' hands and lead them down that way, which is what your books do. As we wrap up this conversation, I loved it. I loved every single second of this conversation. And my audience doesn't know, but we had this scheduled for a few weeks ago. And then with everything that happened with Charlie Kirk, I was like, we have to focus on that right now. And I wanted so much to get you back on because our schedule is so full. And I was like, we have to get him back on before the summertime. We need to have him on. So I'm so glad we made this happen because I loved it. You had told me about the Green Ember's evolution and what is coming next. And before you talk about that, I just want to make a pitch for your book for homeschooling families. I think that if you are a homeschooling family and you want something to go in your morning basket, the morning basket is the beginning rhythm of your day. Like for us, our morning starts with breakfast at the table. I always have 2 read alouds that we do. Right now we're reading Charlie Kirk's book and we're reading Brother Andrew's God's Smuggler. So we always read kind of more of a history and then more of a fiction. This time it just turned out that we're reading 2 that are both historical. But we always do 2 books, and then we have verses that we are memorizing and a catechism. And that's our daily, we get into the day doing that together and singing a hymn together. And we've done that for the last decade, and it's been just a beautiful, it's part of us. Like it feels weird when we don't do that. We had the Green Ember in our morning basket too. And I would highly, highly encourage families who are listening, who are homeschooling, to consider the same thing, to bring Green Ember into your daily rhythm, especially if you're looking for a great read aloud where you can have really good conversations, because it leads into really good conversations with your kids. So Green Ember by S.D. Smith. And then I'm going to turn it over to you to close us out and tell us what's next for all the exciting things happening with Green Ember.
Wow, thank you so much. And we do morning basket too. That's true in our house as well. And I've heard from lots of people that has been kind of where their family's been exposed to the Green Ember world first. And I'm so grateful for that. I love homeschooling moms they're my heroes.
The best. The best.
They're so good. Just talk about impact and cultural change. Just like there's nobody doing it better. It's incredible. So there's a new book. That's the 12th book in the series. It's Green Ember, Helmer in the Dragon Tomb. We're doing a book, and we're actually doing a game as well, which is kind of maybe I know some families that's not the best thing for them, or not a thing, but there are so many kids in that world. We're aiming to reach them with a sort of a hospitable, hopeful game that we hope will turn them into readers. That's kind of the goal.
Can you tell us what this one is about, the Dragon Tomb? Can you give us, because this is brand spanking new. I mean, it just got into my mailbox a week or 2 ago. So Can you share with us what the storyline of this is? You can give a spoiler if you want.
I'm very anti-spoiler personally. I mean, you can come in through this door. It is the 12th book in the series, but you don't have to have read the other 11. You can read this one first. And it is, I think the heart of it, it's about one of the most popular characters is the old mentor, the crusty old veteran mentor to the young Pickett in the first Green Ember book, and in that series is a character called Helmer, and everybody loves him. He's just like an old persnickety, old wisecracking kind of gruff, but he kind of goes on a journey through this story. He becomes sort of a surrogate father for Pickett. And it's really beautiful what happens with him. But this is his origin story. This is him as a young farmer who has to become a fighter under these circumstances that are like oppressive kind of a thing. And he gets sort of carried off to the Dragon Tomb. But I think the big thing about the new book is that it gives a really clear vision about sort of masculinity, about what it means to be a good man. And
Oh, I like that.
they're not men, they're rabbits, but stand-ins. There are some men in this that are like, and honestly, it's probably the most I've ever sort of taken inspiration from sort of the cultural airs, but there are men who who are evil, who do like, who mistreat women and who are obviously horrible towards women and are horrible role models that a lot of people, even on my side, are like, yeah, look at him. He's a great guy. We should follow him. And I'm just like, what? No, that is not what being a man is about. Oh, you're strong. Congratulations. You know how to fight, but you do not know how to you abuse women. And it's just horrible. And I'm so shocked by people enabling that. And I wanted to just give a really clear vision for, no, this is what a good man is like. A good man has strength, yes. But he knows when to use it. Doesn't use it for domination. He uses it for service. He uses it for love, loyalty, loyal to a cause bigger than him, more than just his own satisfaction, more than just his own. The way he interacts with women is respectful and kind and service oriented, not domineering, not ugly, not. So there's a real through line in this story about like what it means to be a man, and I'm very, very excited for boys and girls. Girls are such eclectic readers that they'll read a lot more widely than boys often, and we got to get boys more. We got to get boys doing better reading. But I think this is a really wonderful story for young boys to read and shaping sort of like what it means to be a good man, to be a faithful man.
That's so cool. I didn't even know that was kind of the underlying story within the story. And I love that. I was just where you and I are tracking, because I just posted, you'll have to go look on what I posted on X, because I see what you see with I know what you're putting down on this. And I finally had enough today. And I just went through a lot of those people, those men who have been promoted. And I mean, it started with Andrew Tate, one of the Tate brothers back in the day. And I couldn't get it. I was like, what is this? Like, what are we doing here? And why are we embracing him and calling this a conservative thing? And then recently with Nick Fuentes, I have been watching it and really paying attention without saying a lot. And I just posted today about it. And I was trying to figure out, like, what is it? And this is going to connect to your Green Ember, everything you just said. But I was like, what is it? What is his pull? Like, I look at him, he's not attractive. He's not like, there's nothing compelling about him. He talks very fast and over your head. So I was trying to figure it out. And, it's so funny. Everything you just said about what this last book of the Green Ember really tries to do for young men is what Nick Fuentes is offering the counterfeit of. And I think it's because, and this is what I had tweeted out, I think it really, Nick Fuentes has found the boys who didn't have the masculine role model. And it's that gang leader mentality is he offers the brute. He's going to say it like a man. He's going to subjugate women because this is what men do. And all these lost boys haven't had the tending of a good father who shows what true masculinity actually looks like. And so they are ready to accept the counterfeit because they just want something.
Totally. I totally agree with that. And it is so heartbreaking. It's not inspiring. It does make me, I am mad about people who indulge that. I think that's so damning and destructive. But that just goes back to, it's not just about, we can't just say that. I mean, I think we should be able to say that's really bad. Don't do that. Do something better. But if you don't have an imagination, if you don't have a father, if you don't have someone in your life to say, the man that we all look up to is a good man. He's trustworthy. He's self-sacrificial. He's not narcissistic. And I think that we're pretty impoverished on that front. And actually I think that's why storytelling is so important to say, like, and even history and stuff, to look and say there have been imperfect, but there have been some men that you can look up to. And I think it's so crucial. And that's one reason why I want to do like films, and I want to do animated sort of stuff, to just give a vision for people who maybe won't get into a book, to say, look, there is another way. And like it might be the only, I think about that a lot. A kid reading the Green Ember, that might be the only encounter with sort of light, or with like a good example that they have. Yes. And so I pray every day that the Lord would use that, not just to build up these homeschooling families that are on the right path in a lot of ways and kind of encourage them. I want that for sure. I want that for my own home. But Lord, I want that. I want to reach some of those other kids. I want to find those fatherless, because that is, I think you've nailed it. And it's so, we're crying out for virtuous heroes that show us what does it mean to be a man, because we're not getting it from the other side either. But it's kind of like, well, what's our alternative? It's got to be better than
Yeah.
that.
Well, what you're doing is you're showing the better standard, where if that standard is never shown, and modern children's fiction is so demeaning of men and of fathers. I mean, it's so gross what our culture has done to men and to fatherhood. And so if there's a vacuum of that in storytelling, then of course, like, young boys are going to look at the Tate brothers and Nick Fuentes and think that is what a man is. That's how a man talks. But you with this are showing a better standard. And that is so biblical, because in the Bible, it says a father to the fatherless is God in his holy dwelling. It's one of my favorite verses, because it's so simple. But that's what you're doing, is you're showing the fatherhood of the father through storytelling. And that's the most beautiful way, because like we said, it gets into your DNA that way. So I love what you're doing. I loved our conversation. How can people follow along with everything you're doing? Oh, and the Green Room, if you want to share that. And then I'll let you close out for the audience.
Oh, thank you, Britt. This has been so fun. I've enjoyed it so much. Thank you. The Green Writer is I do a podcast called The Green Writer for young writers who are I call it they're going and growing. They're green, like they have a green light. They don't have to wait for permission or anything until everything's perfect. They can go. And then green, they're like a young green living thing. You're not yet what you're going to be, but you can be what you are now and grow. And so that's the idea behind The Green Writer. And there's a podcast I do with Brett Harris, and it's really good. And then I have a course as well. But I can't remember what else you said. Oh, just to be able to find me. If you want, anybody can get the Green Ember first book for free as an audiobook if you just go to my site, sdsmith.com.
Oh, so I didn't know that. That's great for people to be able to grab it free like that. But I would recommend you buy it too, and buy a couple copies to give them as gifts. They make great Christmas presents. But that's so cool that you offer that first one free, because it'll get you hooked.
That's true. And I don't necessarily want to just find people and convince people that don't really want it to buy it. But that was a nice way to, like, you can just try it out. And if it's sort of, oh yeah, this is what we want for our family, then yeah, I hope you'll buy more at our little family store and that kind of a thing. But that's the invitation, and it's there for anybody, and it's free. So I hope people will give it a chance.
Well, thank you so much for coming on and talking about how stories can be a weapon of great good against so much darkness and evil in this world. And I just wish you all the success. This was such a fun conversation. We will definitely have you back on again. I love what you're focusing on in the Green Ember Helmer. I think that is so needed. I'm so proud of you. And onward, brother. Keep on going.
Thank you, sister. Appreciate that.